All right, everybody, Miss Brecht again, talking about ecological footprints. So we talked about the tragedy of the commons, and then this leads great into how we utilize our resources as individuals. So you'll notice that this says 5.11, and technically this is in Unit 5 of the curriculum document, but we're going to talk about it now, and then we'll come back to it again when we get to Unit 5, as well as the tragedy of the commons. Both of them address land and water use, but I really want you to look at environmental science through a lens of how can I make changes that are going to impact the world? And how can I encourage others to do the same? So we're talking about ecological footprints because you guys are going to examine your own ecological footprint to see how you can make changes in your own choices to positively impact the environment. So again, here's our slide of objectives, essential knowledge, and skills. Our learning objective is to explain the variables measured in ecological footprints. Our essential knowledge, ecological footprints compare resource demands and waste production required for an individual or a society. So you can get an ecological footprint for a country, or you can get an ecological footprint for an individual. And then our skill is explain what the data implies or illustrates about environmental issues. So we'll have to look at this through a lens of resource use after we look at our own ecological footprints. So an ecological footprint is a measure of how much a person consumes, which is then expressed in an area of land. When we look at our ecological footprints, we are going to examine our energy use. We're going to examine the type of home we live in, our resource use, including like timber and paper, food and fibers, as well as seafood. And that's going to correlate to how we utilize the land and the water available to us as humans. So the factors that we need land for are food, raw materials, housing, and electricity production. So that's impacting the land requirements, and then how we also dispose of our waste. Newsflash, the United States is one of the only countries that uses things like landfills. It's not a very sustainable way to get rid of your trash, but we do it. We also can look at what we call a carbon footprint, which is a little bit different from an ecological footprint because an ecological footprint is measured in global hectares, which is a unit of measurement in terms of land. It's 2.47 acres. So a hectare is a biologically productive area of land, which means it provides food or water or materials for us. That is our ecological footprint. So when you do the activity, it's going to tell you that your ecological footprint is, you use X amount for your food. It's going to tell you how many earths you use when you do the ecological footprint activity. So based on how much resource, how many earths do you use up if everyone lived like you do? The carbon footprint is how many tons of CO2 that are produced each year. So your ecological footprint is, 2.6 global hectares. Your carbon footprint is 4.2. And then your carbon footprint, which is part of your ecological footprint, is 55, this one example, 55% of your ecological footprint is from your carbon footprint. That's the CO2 that's released from an individual or a group based on their consumption and activities, including material goods, food production, energy use. The things that we look at when we're looking at ecological footprint, things that increase your footprint. The affluence of the country that you live in is going to drastically impact your footprint. So how much, the average income is of your country is going to drastically impact that because you're more likely to have larger houses, which means you need more resources to build, to fuel those houses. You probably live further away from an urban center or from services that you need, so you're going to have more travel, which increases your carbon footprint. You're going to need more resources for material goods. You need cars, that kind of thing. Also, we look at your meat consumption. So you've heard, I'm sure, many, many times that consuming meat is very bad for the environment. You need more land to feed those organisms, you need more water and it requires more energy. All of those negatively impact your ecological footprint. And then your fossil fuel usage, heating, electricity, travel, how much plastic you use, all of those things are tied into that ecological footprint. Things that reduce your ecological footprint are the use of renewable energy. So if you use any sort of renewable energy, that's going to help you. Public transportation, meaning you use less gas, having a plant-based diet, less consumption, less travel, less energy use. So if you don't go on multiple vacations a year, that's going to benefit you. If the whole world lived like us, that's the one of the things you're going to see on your ecological footprint. It can also be expressed in the number of Earths. So if everyone in the world lived the way that you do, how many Earths would we really need to sustain the populations? The current average U.S. footprint is 5.1 Earths. So we need 5.1 Earths worth of resources if the entire world consumed resources like the average American. So I'll be interested to see if you're above or below that number. So this is the global footprint of the human population, the present day. This is the footprint of just United States citizens. So look at that drastic difference. Humanity consumes 1.85 Earths, so how much the Earth can produce. So really the issue we have here is we're overusing our resources, and we're going to see the time where we run out. So for your free response, please describe one factor that accounts for the difference in carbon footprint between the United States and Uganda, and explain one environmental consequence of this factor. So remember that carbon footprint is how many CO2, how many tons of CO2 you emit in a year. And that's per capita. So this graph is showing you per person. So why is the United States 16.5 tons, whereas Uganda is 0.1? So what is one factor that accounts for that difference? And then also, what's a negative environmental consequence of that, whatever factor you choose? All right, guys, I hope you have learned a lot about this and you are looking forward to seeing your own ecological footprint. And I can't wait to talk about this with you in class. Have a great night.